The fever arrived on a Tuesday afternoon like a thief, stripping strength from her limbs and turning her thoughts to cotton. Elena Emerson sat curled on the second-hand sofa in her sublet, shivering despite the 3 layers she wore, her sketchbook abandoned on the coffee table where a half-finished commission glowed on her tablet screen. The loft conversion was too big for one person, all exposed brick and industrial beams, and the February cold seemed to seep through the warehouse walls no matter how high she cranked the ancient radiator. She had moved in 6 weeks ago, a temporary landing while she figured out her next steps after her roommate situation imploded and her freelance work became too sporadic to justify Manhattan rent. The knock startled her badly enough that she nearly rolled off the cushions. Elena blinked at her front door, confusion cutting through the feverish haze. She knew exactly 3 people in this building, and by knew, she meant she'd exchanged pleasantries in the hallway exactly twice. The warehouse lofts attracted a particular breed of tenant who valued privacy and space, artists and remote workers and people who kept strange hours. She liked that about the place when she signed the sublease. Another knock, patient and firm. She dragged herself upright, her head swimming, and shuffled to the door in her mismatched socks. The peephole showed her the neighbor from upstairs, the one who lived on the top floor in the penthouse unit she couldn't imagine affording in 3 lifetimes. Tall, unnaturally still, with that distinctive white hair she'd noticed the first time they'd shared the elevator. Elena opened the door and immediately registered 3 things: soup in a proper ceramic container with steam curling from the lid, a blanket so thick and soft-looking it might have been woven from clouds, and a small portable hard drive dangling from his other hand. "Oh," she said intelligently, her voice hoarse. "Hello." Cassian Jareth looked at her with eyes the color of winter ice, pale and ancient and entirely unreadable. His skin held that same moonlight pallor as his hair, and he wore all black despite the late afternoon hour, a simple button-down and slacks that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean, with the kind of austere bone structure that belonged on classical statues. "You are ill," he said. Not a question. His accent carried old-world weight, European but difficult to place, consonants precise as cut glass. "Just the flu, I think." "I'm okay. Really, move over." He said it the way one might observe the weather, a simple statement of fact that left no room for negotiation, and then he was stepping past her into the loft, bringing with him the scent of night air and something darker, something that made her hindbrain whisper danger, even as her conscious mind scrambled to catch up. Elena closed the door automatically, following him as he crossed to her kitchenette and set the soup container on the counter with care, the blanket he draped over the back of her sofa, and the hard drive he placed beside her tablet. "I don't understand," she managed, watching him move through her space with unsettling familiarity, as though he'd memorized the layout without ever having stepped inside before. Cassian turned to face her fully, and the weight of his attention felt almost physical. "You have been coughing for 2 days. You ordered delivery last night and left it outside your door for 3 hours. This morning you tried to leave for supplies and made it to the stairwell before returning." He paused. "You need care." Heat that had nothing to do with fever crept into her cheeks. "You've been keeping track of me?" "I keep track of everything in my building." His building. She filed that information away for later examination. "That's a little creepy." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his expression, gone too fast to be certain. "Yes," he agreed, and pulled out a bowl from her cabinet with unerring accuracy. He ladled soup with steady hands, brought it to the coffee table, then returned to the kitchen for a spoon and napkin. Elena sank onto the sofa, too tired and achy to maintain her protest. The blanket appeared around her shoulders a moment later, heavy and warm and smelling faintly of cedar. She hadn't seen him move. "The hard drive," Cassian said, settling into the chair across from her with perfect posture, "contains the films you mentioned preferring." "All of them," she stared at him. "I've barely spoken to you. When did I?" "October 15th in the elevator. You were on the phone with someone discussing weekend plans. You listed 7 titles. December 3rd. You were sketching in the lobby while waiting for a package. The courier asked what you were drawing, and you said a scene from your favorite film. You described it." He folded his hands in his lap, entirely composed. There are 43 total. I may have extrapolated some choices based on common themes. Elena's mind spun. She vaguely remembered both conversations, background noise in her daily life, never imagining anyone was actually listening, cataloging, remembering. That's incredibly thoughtful and absolutely insane. Eat, he said. She ate because the soup was perfect and she couldn't remember the last time she'd managed more than crackers, and because arguing seemed to require energy she didn't possess. It was chicken and rice with vegetables, seasoned exactly right, the kind of careful cooking that spoke of experience and attention. She finished the entire bowl while Cassian sat in patient silence, watching her with that unnerving stillness. "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked finally, setting the bowl down. "We don't know each other." "You are unwell and alone," he said, as though this explained everything. "That is unacceptable. Do you do this for all your tenants?" "No." The word hung between them, weighted with implications Elena's fever-fogged brain couldn't quite untangle. She pulled the blanket tighter, suddenly aware of how awful she must look. Hair unwashed and wearing her oldest sweats, no makeup and probably glassy-eyed with fever. Cassian stood smoothly and moved to her small entertainment center, examining her television setup with the same focused attention he seemed to bring to everything. "Which would you like to watch first? You're planning to stay?" He glanced at her over his shoulder, and for just an instant, his expression softened into something almost gentle. "Yes, you should not be alone." Something in Elena's chest cracked open, a loneliness she'd been ignoring for months suddenly exposed and aching. She'd been so focused on survival, on making rent and meeting deadlines and proving she could handle independence, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone simply care. "The Princess Bride," she whispered, "that one's comfort food." He found it in seconds, set it up with quiet competence, and dimmed the lights. Elena curled into the corner of her sofa, wrapped in the impossibly soft blanket, and watched one of her favorite movies while the strange, stoic man from upstairs settled back into his chair like a guardian statue. She fell asleep before the sword fight, consciousness sliding away to the sound of clever dialogue and the weight of knowing she wasn't alone. When Elena woke, it was dark outside, her apartment lit only by the television's glow, showing menu screens on loop. Her fever had broken enough that she could think more clearly, though her body still felt wrung out and heavy. Cassian remained in the chair, awake and alert, his pale eyes catching the screen's light like a cat's. "You stayed," she said, surprised. "I said I would. But that was hours ago. It's nighttime now." "Yes." Elena struggled upright, pushing sweaty hair from her face. "Don't you have things to do? A life? This is really above and beyond neighborly duty." "I have nowhere else I need to be." He rose in one fluid motion, too graceful for someone so large, and crossed to feel her forehead with the back of his hand. His skin was cool, almost cold, but his touch was gentle. Still warm. "I will make tea." He was in her kitchen before she could respond, moving with that same quiet efficiency, and Elena found herself watching him through new eyes. In the dimness, he looked even more otherworldly, all sharp contrasts and elegant lines, beautiful in a way that seemed almost inhuman. She thought of old paintings, aristocratic portraits, vampires from Gothic novels. The thought made her laugh, a thin, creaky sound. "Something amusing?" Cassian asked without turning from the kettle. "I was just thinking you look like a vampire," Elena admitted, because fever still had her filters down. "The fancy kind from old movies, elegant and dangerous." He went very still. Then, carefully, he said, "That is perceptive of you. I'm an illustrator. I notice details." She accepted the tea he brought, chamomile with honey, perfect temperature. "Thank you for all of this, I mean it." Cassian inclined his head slightly, a gesture that felt archaic and formal. "You're welcome." They watched Pride and Prejudice next, the BBC version, and Elena drifted in and out of awareness while Cassian remained a constant presence in her peripheral vision. Once she woke to find a glass of water on the table beside her, condensation beating on the outside. Another time she surfaced to the sound of her phone buzzing and Cassian's voice, quiet and firm, telling someone that Elena was unwell and would respond to work emails when she recovered. "You can't just answer my phone," she mumbled. "Someone needed to." He appeared beside the sofa, crouching to her eye level with effortless balance. You require rest, not stress about deadlines. My job is deadlines. Your job will wait. Health cannot. There was something immovable in his tone, an authority that made arguing feel pointless. Elena let her eyes drift shut again and felt cool fingers brush her cheek, checking for fever with a gentleness that made her throat tight. "Sleep," Cassian said softly. "I am here." She did. Wednesday passed in a feverish blur of soup and tea and carefully timed medication that appeared at her elbow with clockwork precision. Cassian brought her fresh blankets when she sweated through the first, produced tissues before she could ask, and kept the television running through her entire movie collection with flawless memory for which she'd already seen and which she'd wanted to re-watch. He spoke little, but his presence filled the space like a promise. When Elena felt strong enough to shower on Wednesday evening, emerging from the bathroom shaky but clean, she found he'd somehow tidied her entire living space without disturbing a single thing that mattered. Her sketchbooks remained exactly where she'd left them, but dishes were done, surfaces wiped, trash emptied. "You cleaned," she said, overwhelmed. "You're attempting to recover. Chaos inhibits healing." He studied her, taking in the damp hair and fresh clothes. "Better? Much. But you've been here for over 24 hours. Don't you need to sleep?" "I keep unusual hours. Sleep's not currently necessary." Elena padded to the sofa and sat, feeling almost human again. "Cassian, why are you really doing this?" He remained standing, silhouetted against her windows, the city lights of lower Manhattan glittering behind him. For a long moment he said nothing, and Elena watched emotions flicker across his face too quickly to name, his usual marble composure cracking at the edges. "Because you deserve care," he said finally. "Because I have watched you work yourself to exhaustion for weeks, eating poorly and sleeping less, and no one checks on you. Because when you laugh on the phone with friends, you sound bright and alive. But the moment you hang up, your shoulders curve inward, as though bracing for impact." His hands flexed at his sides. "Because you are kind to the delivery people, and you leave water out for the building's cat, and you once helped the elderly man on the second floor carry groceries up 3 flights without being asked. Because you deserve better than being ill and alone." Elena's chest constricted. "You have been paying attention." "I cannot seem to help it." The admission sounded like it cost him something. "You live in my domain, under my protection, and I find I am unwilling to see you suffer when I can prevent it." "Your domain," she repeated slowly. "You really do own this building." "Yes. And you've been watching me specifically, not just general landlord awareness." "Yes. Why?" Cassian turned to face her fully, and the look in his pale eyes stole her breath. "Because from the moment you moved in, I have been unable to look away. Because your heartbeat echoes through walls that should be soundproof, and I find myself tracking its rhythm like a compass point. Because I am ancient and dangerous, and I have not felt anything resembling human curiosity in decades. But you make me want to understand what it is to be warm and alive again." The words hung in the air between them, naked and raw. "Ancient," Elena whispered. "When I said you looked like a vampire, you said I was perceptive." "Yes? You weren't joking." "No." She should be terrified, should be calling the police or running for the door, or at minimum questioning her sanity. Instead, Elena found herself looking at the man who had spent 2 days caring for her with infinite patience, who had memorized her favorite movies and made perfect soup and watched over her like she was something precious, and she thought about the cold skin and the stillness and the way he seemed to move through shadows like he was made of them. "Show me," she said. Cassian went statue still. "That is unwise." "Show me anyway." Something shifted in his expression, a resignation mixed with relief, as though he'd been waiting for this moment while dreading it. He moved closer, and the lamplight caught his features in sharp relief. When he opened his mouth slightly, she saw the fangs, delicate and deadly, exactly where canines should be, but longer, sharper, designed for penetration. Elena's heart hammered, but not with fear, with fascination, with the strange rightness of finally seeing the truth she'd somehow sensed from the beginning. "I am what your stories call Nosferatu, though we prefer older names. I am king of the North American territories, master of 13 bloodlines, and I have walked this earth for 347 years. His voice dropped to something darker, older. I have killed to protect what is mine, and I will kill again without hesitation. I am not human, not safe, and I should not be this close to you. But here you are anyway, Elena said, with soup and blankets and my favorite movies, taking care of me when I'm at my most vulnerable. Yes. That's the thing about you, isn't it? All this power and danger, but you use it to make tea and do dishes and let me sleep while you stand guard. She leaned forward, testing her own courage. You're not here to hurt me, Cassian. You're here because you care, and that terrifies you more than any enemy could. His jaw tightened. Caring makes weakness. I have enemies who would use any vulnerability against me. If they knew I had formed an attachment to a human, to you, they would come for you without mercy. Is that why you've been isolated? Keeping everyone at arm's length? A king cannot afford softness. It invites challenge, betrayal, death. That sounds lonely. Loneliness is safer than loss. Elena stood, still weak but steady enough, and closed the distance between them. Cassian tracked her movement like a predator, every muscle coiled with tension, but he didn't retreat. She reached up slowly, telegraphing her intention, and pressed her palm to his chest where his heart should beat. Nothing. Just cool stillness. You gave up being human a long time ago, she said quietly. But you're still a person. Still someone who deserves connection and care just like anyone else. Maybe I'm just a sick girl with terrible timing, but I think you stayed because you wanted to, because some part of you is tired of being alone even if it's safer. And I'm glad you did. Elena. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a warning. You do not understand what you are inviting. Then help me understand. Stay. Talk to me. Let me know you. She smiled up at him, feeling the fever still lurking at the edges, but pushed back by something stronger. I've already seen the dangerous vampire king. Now, show me the person who remembers 43 movies because I mentioned them in passing. Something in Cassian's expression crumbled, centuries of control giving way to naked longing. His hand came up to cup her face with infinite care, thumb brushing her cheekbone as though she were made of spun glass. I have not wanted anything for myself in so long, he whispered. I had forgotten how it feels. You have reminded me, and I find I am both grateful and terrified. Elena turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss to his cool skin. Then be terrified together with me. I'm scared too, but I'm still here. He made a sound low in his chest, something between a growl and a sigh, and then he was gathering her carefully against him, his arms a cage of protection and restrained strength. Elena wrapped her own arms around his waist and felt him shudder, this ancient, powerful creature, undone by a simple embrace. They stood like that for a long time, the city humming beyond the windows, and something fundamental shifted between them, a door opening that neither could close again. Thursday morning brought Elena back to something resembling health, the fever finally broken and her strength returning in increments. She woke on the sofa to find Cassian gone, but evidence of his presence everywhere. Fresh flowers in a vase she didn't own, more soup in the refrigerator with heating instructions in elegant script, a note that said simply, "Rest. I will return at sunset." The hard drive sat beside her television, and Elena spent the afternoon curled under his blanket, watching movies and sketching, feeling the phantom warmth of his presence like a shield. He returned as the last rays of sun disappeared, appearing at her door with more supplies and that same watchful intensity. Elena let him in with a smile and saw his shoulders relax infinitesimally, as though he'd been worried she might change her mind about allowing him near. "Better?" he asked, studying her with clinical precision. "Almost normal. Your soup is magic." Merely well prepared, but she caught the pleased curve to his mouth, barely there and gone in an instant. They fell into an easy routine, Cassian moving through her space with increasing familiarity, while Elena peppered him with questions about his life, his world, the impossible reality of vampires walking among humans. He answered with careful honesty, painting a picture of hidden societies and ancient hierarchies, of political maneuvering and territorial disputes that made human power games look like children's playground squabbles. We have laws, he explained, sitting across from her while she ate dinner. His own nutrition derived from sources he didn't detail and she didn't push. Old codes that govern behavior, protect the masquerade, maintain order. I enforce them for this entire continent. It is not a position one can resign from. Sounds exhausting. It is necessary. Without structure, without a strong hand, our kind would tear each other apart and expose us all to human discovery. That cannot happen. Why not? We're living in the 21st century. Maybe people would be more accepting than you think. Cassian's expression went grim. Humans fear what they do not understand, and rightly so. We are predators. We require blood to survive. We are stronger and faster and capable of great violence. If our existence became public knowledge, there would be war, and it would end badly for both species. Better to remain in shadow, myths and stories that most dismiss as fiction. Elena absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. That's why you're so careful, why you keep isolated. Yes, a king is a symbol. I must be beyond reproach, beyond question. Any perceived weakness invites challenge from those who wish to rule in my place. But you still came to take care of me. His eyes found hers, intense and unreadable. Yes, that was unwise and selfish, and I would do it again without hesitation. Her heart squeezed. I'm glad you did. They watched Sense and Sensibility, and partway through, Elena shifted from the sofa to sit on the floor beside Cassian's chair, leaning against his leg in comfortable intimacy. His hand came to rest on her head after a moment, fingers threading through her hair with hypnotic gentleness, and she felt him relax by degrees, the constant vigilance easing into something softer. This is nice, she murmured. Just being together. Yes, he agreed quietly. It is. Have you ever had this before? Someone to watch movies with, to just exist beside? His hand stilled briefly before resuming its motion. Long ago, before I was turned, I was someone different then, warmer perhaps. The vampire king you know now was forged by necessity and time. I let that earlier version die because gentleness felt like liability. Maybe he's not dead, just dormant, waiting for a reason to wake up. Cassian's fingers tightened in her hair, a careful pressure. You are determined to find goodness where it may not exist. I'm determined to see you as a whole person, not just the armor you wear. Elena tilted her head to look up at him, finding his face closer than expected, his attention fixed on her with burning intensity. You've taken care of me for days. You've been patient and kind and thoughtful. That's not armor, Cassian. That's who you are underneath. Who I am will bring you danger. Then we'll face it together. He made that sound again, half broken and aching, and suddenly he was on the floor beside her, moving too fast to track, pulling her into his lap with careful strength. Elena went willingly, settling against his chest and feeling his arms band around her like iron made gentle. I'm trying to protect you, he said against her hair, even from myself. I know. But I don't need that kind of protection. I need honesty and presence and someone who sees me as an equal, not something fragile to be managed. You are human. Fragile is definitional. I'm also smart and capable and making my own choices. This is mine to decide, Cassian, whether the risk is worth it. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. And it is. You are. The kiss happened with inevitability, his mouth finding hers with a tenderness that made her chest ache. He kissed like it mattered, like she was precious and rare, holding her carefully and letting her control the depth and pressure. Elena sank into it, tasting cool and dark and something fundamentally other, and felt desire kindle warm in her belly. When they broke apart, both breathing harder, though only one of them technically needed to, Cassian pressed his forehead to hers. You undo me, he whispered, so easily and completely. I do not recognize myself with you. Good. Because the untouchable vampire king is impressive, but I like this version better. The one who stays and kisses me and lets himself feel things. Dangerous things. Complicated things. The best things usually are. They stayed tangled together on the floor, talking in low voices while the movie played forgotten, and Elena felt herself falling in a way that should terrify her, but somehow felt like finally landing somewhere safe. Friday afternoon shattered their fragile peace. Elena had insisted Cassian go handle whatever business he'd been neglecting, practically shoving him out of her apartment with promises that she was well enough to manage a few hours alone. He'd left reluctantly, extracting promises that she would call if she needed anything, and Elena spent the time catching up on work emails and sketching, feeling more herself than she had in a week. The knock at her door came at 3, sharp and aggressive. Elena checked the peephole and found a stranger, a man with the same pale skin and white hair as Cassian, beautiful and cold and wrong in ways that made her instincts scream. She didn't open the door. Elena Emerson, the stranger said, his voice carrying easily through the wood. We should speak. It concerns your pet king. I don't talk to strangers who show up uninvited. How wise, but I'm not leaving, and your door will not keep me out if I wish entry. Better to speak civilly. Elena's hand trembled as she pulled out her phone, texting Cassian a single word: trouble. What do you want? She called. To deliver a message, Cassian Jareth has been seen entering and leaving your apartment for 4 consecutive days, an unprecedented breach of his own protocols. This has not gone unnoticed. There are those who believe a king so distracted by human attachment is a king unfit to rule. Ice slid down Elena's spine. He's not distracted. He's allowed to have a life. Our kind do not have lives in that sense. We have duties, territories, power to maintain. Personal entanglements are weaknesses to exploit. A pause. He is currently in council, did you know? Meeting with regional masters who question his judgment. They asked specifically about you, about why the great Cassian Jareth has been playing nursemaid to a fragile human artist. He, of course, denied any attachment of substance, called you an amusing curiosity, nothing more. The words hit like physical blows. Elena closed her eyes, forcing breath through the tightness in her chest. She didn't believe it, couldn't believe it, not after everything they'd shared. But doubt whispered poison. You're lying, she said. Am I? Ask yourself why he hasn't offered you protection, not real protection. Why he hasn't claimed you formally before his court, bound you to him in ways that would make touching you an act of war. Because doing so would be admitting the truth, that the untouchable king has fallen for a mortal girl, and that makes him vulnerable. The stranger's voice dropped, intimate and cruel. He will abandon you when this becomes inconvenient, when keeping you threatens his position. Better to extract yourself now with dignity. Get away from my door. As you wish, but consider. Right now, Cassian Jareth is in a building 20 blocks from here, surrounded by vampires who want him gone, and you are here alone with no protection except what I am gracious enough to extend. That is what your life will become if you continue this farce. Always at risk, always a target, never truly safe. Is his attention truly worth that price? Footsteps retreated down the hall, and Elena sagged against the door, adrenaline making her shake. Her phone buzzed. I am coming. Do not open the door for anyone. Too late for that warning, but she didn't type it. Just, please hurry. He arrived in less than 10 minutes, which should have been impossible given the distance, and Elena barely registered his knock before she was yanking the door open and throwing herself into his arms. Cassian caught her reflexively, his body rigid with tension, and when he spoke, his voice was lethal. Who was here? I don't know his name. White hair, pale, vampire. He said people are questioning you because you've been with me. Said you were in a council meeting denying I mattered. She pulled back, searching his face. Tell me that's not true. The meeting is accurate. There was concern about my recent absences. I attended to address it. His jaw worked. What I said there is not what I feel. Politics requires certain performances. So you did deny me. I denied them ammunition. There is a difference. Cassian's hands tightened on her shoulders. Whoever came here, they want to sow discord between us, make you doubt and fear so you will push me away. It is a tactic, Elena, not truth. But you haven't claimed me, formally. He said that means I don't actually matter, not in ways your world recognizes. A formal claim is binding in ways I did not wish to impose without your consent and understanding. It would tie you to me, make you a recognized part of my household, extend my protection officially. It also broadcasts your importance to every vampire in my territories and beyond. I was trying to protect you from becoming a target." Elena stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm already a target. Him showing up here proves that. The question is whether you're going to keep trying to manage this alone or whether you're going to trust me enough to let me stand with you." Cassian looked stricken, more emotion visible on his face than she'd ever seen. "If I claim you formally and something happens, if you are hurt because of me, then that's the risk I choose to take." Elena moved back into his space, reaching up to frame his face with her hands. "I'm falling in love with you, Cassian. Not the king, not the careful political creature, but you. The person who memorized my favorite movies and made soup and held me while I coughed. I want to be part of your life, the real parts, not just the careful performance. And I understand that comes with danger, but I'd rather face it as yours than hide and hope nobody notices me anyway." "Elena," her name broke in his mouth, "I have spent lifetimes avoiding this exact vulnerability. I know. And you can walk away right now, keep yourself safe behind all those walls. But if you stay, if you choose this, then choose it fully. Let me in all the way. Trust me to be strong enough to handle your world." For a long moment, Cassian simply looked at her, centuries of careful control warring with something raw and desperate in his expression. Then, with a sound like surrender, he pulled her to him and kissed her fierce and claiming, one hand cradling her skull while the other pressed her body flush against his. "I am falling in love with you as well," he said against her mouth. "I have been since the moment you moved into my building and made it feel less like a fortress. You terrify me, Elena Emerson. You make me want impossible things. Then let's make them possible together." He kissed her again, deeper, and Elena felt the shift in him, the last barriers crumbling. When they finally broke apart, Cassian's eyes had darkened to something ancient and possessive. "There will be consequences," he warned. "Challenges I must answer, political maneuvering that will turn vicious. My enemies will try to use you against me. And we'll handle it. You're not alone anymore, Cassian. Neither of us is." He searched her face, looking for doubt or fear, and must have found only determination, because he nodded slowly. "Then we do this correctly. Tonight, before my assembled court, I will claim you formally, make you mine in all the ways my world understands. After that, touching you will be the same as attacking me directly." I like the sound of that. "You understand there will be a ceremony. Old words and blood magic, witnessed and binding. It is not marriage in human terms, but it is permanent in ours. You would be bound to my household, my protection, my life." Elena's heart hammered. "I understand, and I want this. I want you." Cassian pulled her close again, tucking her against his chest and resting his chin on her head. "I will kill anyone who tries to harm you," he said quietly, "without hesitation or mercy. You should know that part of me. I do know, and I trust you." She pressed a kiss to his throat, feeling him shiver. "When do we need to leave for this ceremony?" "Sunset. 3 hours from now. I will have appropriate clothing sent to you and guards posted outside your door until we depart. No one will reach you again." "Where will it be?" "Beneath the building. My court maintains chambers in the sub-levels, spaces humans do not access. We will descend together, and I will present you before the assembled bloodline masters. They will acknowledge you, or they will challenge me directly. Either way, by midnight, everyone will understand that you are mine and I am yours." The word sent a thrill through Elena, possessive and romantic in equal measure. "I'm not afraid. You should be, at least a little. Maybe, but I'm also an artist who likes a dramatic gesture, and this definitely qualifies." She pulled back to grin at him. "Besides, I've seen you do dishes and make tea. Your court is about to learn their terrifying king has a soft side." "I have no such thing," Cassian said, but his mouth curved slightly. "Only with you. Only ever with you. That works for me." The clothing arrived an hour later, delivered by a silent woman with knowing eyes and the same vampiric pallor. Elena opened the box to find a dress that looked like liquid shadow, black and elegant and clearly tailored specifically for her. She emerged from her bedroom at sunset, feeling like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But Cassian's expression when he saw her made her feel like royalty. "You are breathtaking," he said simply, offering his hand. Elena took it, letting him lead her from the apartment and toward the elevator. Instead of pressing the button for the lobby, Cassian produced a key and inserted it into a panel she'd never noticed, and suddenly they were descending past the ground floor, down into depths that shouldn't exist beneath the building. The doors opened onto a space that belonged in a Gothic cathedral, all soaring arches and stone pillars and candlelight flickering across carved walls. Vampires filled the chamber, dozens of them, all pale and beautiful and watching with predatory focus as Cassian led Elena forward. At the far end, a raised dais held a throne of dark wood and iron, imposing and ancient. Cassian guided her up the steps and then turned to face the assembled court, Elena at his side. "I invoke the right of formal claim," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space, layered with power that made the air vibrate. "Elena Emerson, human, artist, resident in my domain. I claim her as mine, bound to my household, under my protection, part of my bloodline in all ways our laws recognize. Witness and acknowledge." Silence, heavy and waiting. Elena felt dozens of eyes on her, assessing, calculating, judging. Then a man stepped forward from the crowd, older than the others if immortal beings could be called old, with scars visible on his neck and hands. "You understand what this means, Jareth? She becomes leverage, a weakness your enemies will exploit without mercy." "I understand, and any who try will face my personal response. She is human, fragile, mortal, meaningless in the scope of our politics." "She is mine," Cassian said, and the words rang like steel. "And therefore she is everything. Challenge my judgment if you will, Lucian, but understand that I will defend this claim with lethal finality." The scarred vampire studied them both, and Elena forced herself to meet his gaze directly, refusing to show fear. After a long moment, Lucian smiled slightly and inclined his head. "Witnessed," he said. "The king has claimed. Let it be recorded and respected." Other voices echoed the acknowledgement, spreading through the chamber like ripples, and Elena felt the weight of it settle over her, a magical binding that tingled across her skin. Cassian's hand found hers, squeezing gently, and when she looked up at him, his expression was fierce with triumph and possessiveness. "It is done," he said softly, just for her. "You are mine now, in every way that matters." "And you're mine," Elena replied, equally quiet. "Don't forget that part." His smile was genuine and startling, transforming his entire face into something warm. "Never." The ceremony continued with rituals Elena didn't fully understand, ancient words in languages she didn't speak, and through it all, Cassian remained at her side, solid and protective. When blood magic was invoked, she felt it in her bones, a connection forming between them that transcended simple attraction or affection. She was bound to him now, part of his household and lineage, protected by laws older than nations. It should have terrified her. Instead, Elena felt safe in ways she never had before, anchored by his presence and the knowledge that she wasn't alone in navigating the impossible. The gathering dispersed slowly as the night deepened, vampires approaching to offer formal acknowledgement, studying Elena with curiosity and varying degrees of approval or skepticism. She handled it with grace, learned from years of client meetings, smiling and responding to questions without revealing too much, aware that Cassian watched every interaction with hawkish intensity. When the chamber finally emptied, leaving just the two of them in the candlelit space, Elena sagged slightly with relief. Cassian caught her immediately, steadying her with careful hands. "That was intense," she admitted. "Your court is terrifying." "They can be, but you handled yourself beautifully. Several of the masters commented on your composure." "I was faking most of it." "All the more impressive." He tucked her against his side, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I am absurdly proud of you." Elena laughed, giddy with adrenaline and relief. "What happens now?" "Now we return upstairs and you rest. Tomorrow the official announcements will circulate through vampire channels, making your status known across territories. There will likely be responses, some favorable, some less so. We will handle each as it comes." "Together," she said firmly. "Together," he agreed. I have guards stationed discreetly throughout the building now. No one will reach you without going through them first, and I will be near, always. This apartment, my floor, they are secure. Will you stay tonight? I know you probably have king things to do, but I could use the company after all that. Cassian's expression softened. I would like nothing more. Though I warn you, I am poor at sleeping and will likely spend most of the night watching you. I'll allow it, this once, but eventually we need to work on your creepy watching habits. I make no promises. They ascended back to her loft, the familiar space feeling safer now with Cassian's presence and the knowledge of vampires stationed throughout the building. Elena changed into comfortable clothes while Cassian moved through her apartment with growing ease, no longer a guest, but something approaching home. She found him standing by the windows, looking out over the city, and slipped her arms around him from behind. Thank you, she said against his back, for taking care of me when I was sick, for staying, for choosing this even though it's complicated. Cassian turned in her embrace, looking down at her with infinite tenderness. Thank you for seeing past the careful masks to the person beneath, for demanding honesty and presence, for being brave enough to love someone who comes with centuries of baggage and political nightmares. I don't think bravery factors into it. I just know what I want, and it's you. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Elena felt the truth of the bond between them humming in her blood, magic and emotion woven together into something unbreakable. They settled on the sofa eventually, Elena curled against Cassian's side while he idly played with her hair, both content to simply exist together in comfortable silence. She thought about how far they'd come in just a few days, from near strangers to this impossible intimacy, and marveled at the strange twists life could take. What was he like? Elena asked quietly. The man you were before you became this? Cassian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, carefully, he said, softer, quick to laugh, easy with affection. I was studying law at university, believed in justice and fairness, thought I would spend my life helping people navigate complex systems. A pause. I was idealistic and naive and unbearably earnest. I do not recognize that person in what I became. What happened? I was murdered by someone I trusted, a professor who turned out to be ancient and hungry. I woke 3 days later in a tomb. Everything I had been burned away by the transformation. The vampire who made me was cruel, saw potential for a useful tool rather than a person. I learned quickly that sentimentality was fatal in that world, so I excised it, became cold and efficient and dangerous, and eventually I killed my maker and took his territories. His fingers tightened in her hair. I have been that creature for over 3 centuries. You are the first person since my human death to make me remember what it felt like to be warm. Elena's throat ached. I think that person is still there under all the armor. He came back when he brought me soup and stayed. Perhaps. Or perhaps you simply inspire a better version of who I am now. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Either way, I find I'm grateful beyond measure for the chance to discover it with you. They talked deep into the night, trading stories and secrets, building the foundation of real understanding between them. Elena learned about vampire politics and bloodline hierarchies, ancient feuds and modern challenges. Cassian learned about her childhood, her path to becoming an illustrator, the dreams she carried for her art and life. It was dawn before Elena finally fell asleep, tucked safe against Cassian's chest, and she woke hours later to find him still there, watching over her with patient devotion as sunlight tried to creep around blackout curtains he must have hung while she slept. The attack came on Saturday night. Elena was working on a commission in her studio space, Cassian reading in the chair nearby with that preternatural stillness when the building's alarms shrieked to life. He was on his feet instantly, every line of his body coiled for violence. Stay here, he commanded, already moving toward the door. Guards are outside. Do not leave this apartment. What's happening? Challenge. 3 bloodline masters who oppose the formal claim have come to test my resolve. His expression had gone cold and lethal, the dangerous king she'd glimpsed beneath his gentleness. They will not succeed. He was gone before she could respond, the door closing with finality, and Elena heard shouting in the hallway, sounds of impact and struggle. Every instinct screamed to hide, to take cover and wait for it to be over. But these were Cassian's enemies, coming for him because of her, and she couldn't just sit idle while he fought alone. Elena grabbed her phone, pulling up the building's security app Cassian had given her access to. Cameras showed chaos throughout the common areas, vampires fighting with brutal efficiency, and her heart seized when she spotted Cassian on the top floor, engaged with 3 opponents simultaneously. He was devastatingly competent, moving with inhuman speed and precision, but 3 against 1 wore down even ancient kings. She watched him take a blow that should have been disabling, saw him stumble, and panic overrode sense. The sun had set hours ago, but morning would come eventually. If she could just hold out until dawn, the attackers would have to retreat or burn. Elena checked the time, 3 hours until sunrise. An idea crystallized, reckless and probably stupid, but better than doing nothing. She raced to her kitchen, grabbing the heaviest pan she owned, and then went to her front door. The guards posted outside were gone, presumably drawn into the fighting. She climbed the stairs to the penthouse level, following the sounds of combat, and emerged into the open loft space that made up Cassian's apartment. It was chaos, furniture shattered and walls damaged, and in the center stood Cassian, bleeding from multiple wounds, held by 2 vampires while a third approached with a wooden stake raised. "The great Jareth," the one with the stake said, contempt dripping from every word. "Brought low by human pussy and sentiment, your reign ends tonight and we will carve out better territories from what you leave behind." Elena didn't think, just acted. She swung the pan with all her strength, connecting with the stakeholder's skull hard enough to make her hands ring with impact. He went down, more from surprise than actual damage, and 3 pairs of vampiric eyes snapped to her with predatory focus. "Elena! Run!" Cassian's voice, raw with fear and fury, but she'd already committed. Elena grabbed the fallen stake, its wood smooth and deadly in her grip, and pointed it at the nearest vampire with shaking hands. "Let him go," she said, forcing her voice steady, "or I start making this really inconvenient for everyone." One of the vampires holding Cassian laughed. "Little human, you have no idea what you're threatening." "Maybe not, but I know you can't kill me without declaring war on Cassian's entire bloodline, and he can't kill me at all because of the formal claim. That stake, though. I can use that on any of you without political consequence." She met Cassian's eyes, saw the mix of terror and pride there. "So either you leave right now, or we find out how good my aim is." The standoff held for an eternal moment, tension thick enough to choke on. Then Cassian moved, a sudden explosive surge of strength that broke the holds on him, and he was beside Elena in a heartbeat, placing himself between her and the 3 attackers. "You were told," he said, voice layered with lethal promise. "Touch her and face me. She has made her own threat clear. I suggest you take both seriously." The 3 vampires exchanged glances, recalculating odds that had just shifted dramatically. Finally, the one Elena had struck rose slowly, touching the already healing wound on his head. "This isn't over," he said. "The council will hear of this breach in protocol. The council will hear that 3 bloodline masters attacked their king in his own domain and were driven off by his claimed human," Cassian corrected coldly. "That is what will be recorded. Now, leave my territory before I decide formal responses are insufficient and simply end you." They left, moving with wounded pride and backward glances, and the moment they cleared the threshold, Cassian sealed every entrance with what looked like pure will, magic flooding the space with palpable weight. Then he turned to Elena, and his expression cycled through a dozen emotions too fast to track before landing on exasperated affection. "You magnificent, terrifying woman," he said, pulling her into his arms with desperate strength. "You could have been killed. So could you. I wasn't going to just wait downstairs while they hurt you." Elena dropped the stake, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "I know it was reckless, but I couldn't just do nothing. You saved my life. That stake was seconds from my heart." Cassian pulled back enough to cup her face, checking her for injuries with frantic precision. "You are unharmed?" "I'm fine. You're the one bleeding all over your expensive floors." "Irrelevant. I heal." But he let her fuss over him anyway, leading him to sit while she examined the wounds with worried hands. Most were already closing. Vampire regeneration, impressive and slightly horrifying to witness. They came because of me, Elena said quietly. Because you claimed me, and they see it as weakness. They came because they are ambitious fools who misunderstood what claiming you means. You are not my weakness, Elena. You are my strength. They learned that tonight. Cassian caught her hands, pressing kisses to her knuckles. I have fought alone for centuries, trusting no one, allowing no vulnerabilities. You made me remember that having someone at your back, someone worth protecting and who will protect you in turn, is not weakness, but the most ancient strength there is. So we're a team now. We have been since the moment you answered your door and let me in. His smile was genuine and soft. I brought soup and movies, and you gave me hope that I could be more than just a crown and calculated violence. That is magic more potent than any arcane command. Elena kissed him then, careful of his healing injuries, pouring every ounce of love and commitment into the press of their mouths. When they finally broke apart, the loft's damage stood in stark relief around them, evidence of how close they'd come to disaster. We should probably address this mess, she said, and call whoever handles vampire property damage. Tomorrow. Tonight I am taking you back to your apartment. I am ensuring every security measure possible is in place, and then I'm not letting you out of my sight for at least a week. Possessive much? Absolutely. You nearly died for me. I'm allowed to be possessive. Fair enough. Elena helped him to his feet, noting that most of the wounds had sealed completely already. For what it's worth, I'd do it again. You matter, Cassian, not as a king or a title, but as you. I will always have your back, even when it's terrifying. His expression went soft and wondering. I do not deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. They spent the rest of the night in Elena's apartment, Cassian making calls to his various contacts and lieutenants, Elena sketching beside him and listening to him handle the political fallout with quiet authority. The attack was condemned by the majority of bloodline masters, the three responsible stripped of titles and territories, their challenge deemed unlawful and cowardly. By dawn, the situation had resolved itself as much as possible, and Cassian finally allowed himself to relax, gathering Elena into his arms and holding her with infinite care. Move in with me, he said against her hair. Not this apartment, but the penthouse, where we combine both floors into something new, a space for us rather than separate territories. I want you close, Elena, always within reach. Elena's heart soared. That was fast. We've known each other less than 2 weeks. I have existed for 347 years. I know what I want when I find it, and I want you in every way possible for as long as you will have me. That's a pretty serious commitment. Yes, and I'm entirely serious. He pulled back to look at her pale eyes intense. I love you, Elena Emerson, completely and without reservation. You have changed everything about how I understand myself and what I want from existence. Say yes, move in with me. Let us build something together that belongs to both of us. The words were everything she'd wanted to hear, terrifying and perfect in equal measure. Elena thought about her tiny apartment, her carefully independent life, all the reasons she should be cautious and slow and sensible. Then she thought about soup and blankets and 43 movies, about a vampire king who had set aside centuries of isolation to take care of her, about fighting back-to-back against enemies and choosing each other despite impossible complications. Yes, she said, simple and sure. Yes to all of it. I love you too, Cassian. Let's make something beautiful together. His kiss tasted like relief and joy and promise, and Elena sank into it knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of changes and adjustments, combining 2 lives and 2 worlds into something new. They took over both the penthouse and Elena's loft, knocking out floors to create a duplex that blended his regal aesthetic with her artistic chaos. Elena's studio took over half the upper level, huge windows fitted with specialized glass that blocked UV but allowed natural light, letting her work during the day while Cassian rested in the darkened bedroom. He was surprisingly easy to live with, despite the dramatic circumstances of their beginning. Cassian respected her need for work time and space, brought her food when she forgot to eat, and gradually opened up about centuries of experiences and memories. Elena learned to navigate vampire politics by his side, attending court functions and learning the intricate dance of supernatural diplomacy. Some nights were difficult, filled with challenges to handle or enemies to outmaneuver. But they faced everything together, Elena's human practicality balancing Cassian's ancient perspective, their bond deepening with each shared struggle. Other nights were simple and perfect, curled together watching movies from her collection, Cassian learning to relax into domesticity while Elena basked in the safety of his presence. He still watched her with that intense focus, still tracked her heartbeat like a lullaby. But now she understood it for what it was. Love translated through a vampire's particular lens. 6 months after that first knock on her door, Elena stood in their shared living room, sunlight streaming through the day-safe windows while Cassian slept below, and marveled at how completely her life had transformed. She'd come to this building lost and alone, scrambling to survive, and found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. A partner, a protector, a person who saw her completely and loved her anyway. The portfolio she'd just finished would go out tomorrow, her biggest commission yet, but for now, she simply soaked in the quiet peace of home. Their home, built from impossible circumstances and stubborn determination to make it work. She heard Cassian stirring below as evening approached, the slight sounds of him waking carrying through the open staircase. Elena smiled and headed down to greet him, finding him still drowsy and unusually soft, white hair mussed and expression unguarded. "Good evening," she said, kissing him gently. "Sleep well?" "Better with you in the building." He pulled her close, nuzzling into her neck with contentment. "Your heartbeat is my favorite sound. Still creepy, but I'll allow it because I love you." "I love you as well, endlessly and completely." Cassian straightened, becoming more alert, and studied her face. "You are happy?" "Ridiculously happy. You?" "More than I imagined possible." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth, each press of lips a small declaration. "Thank you for answering your door that first day, for letting me in despite every sensible reason not to. Thank you for bringing soup and blankets and staying when I needed someone." Elena traced the sharp line of his jaw, marveling at how familiar his face had become. "Best decision I ever made, letting the Vampire King into my life." "Second best," Cassian corrected, pulling her toward their kitchen where dinner preparations awaited, the ritual of evening beginning as it did every night. "The best was loving me back despite all the complications." That wasn't really a decision, more like inevitability. "Yes," he agreed softly, gathering her close one more time before they moved into the evening's rhythm. Inevitable and perfect and entirely ours, just as it should be. And Elena, wrapped in the arms of an immortal king who had chosen her as completely as she'd chosen him, couldn't imagine a single thing she'd change about their impossible, beautiful life together.